Welcome to Mac's Future. I did a video like this a couple years ago where I talked about my ideas for the future of the Mac system. And this video is again going to be a lot of ideas that have come out of my head, but also some things other people have been talking about. And this is a much revised, a much more heavily updated version of that video. So here is a very brief overview. Blue lines would go from Forest Grove to Gresham via a downtown subway tunnel. Red lines would go from Fair Complex in Hillsboro Airport to Portland Airport. Yellow line would go from PSU to Expo Center. Green line would go from Bridgeport Village to Clackamas Town Center. Orange line would go from Vancouver, Washington to Oregon City. And the purple line, yes, purple line, would go from Beaverton Transit Center to Bridgeport Village. I would also consider making an airport express that goes from downtown Portland to Portland Airport with very few stops. So let's talk about the subway. This is much needed in the Portland area. The MAX was a fairly early design light rail system, and let's just say we didn't have things figured out yet. We decided to build a streetcar system in downtown, but we called it a light rail system, the MAX. And we also have a mixed traffic streetcar system of a much smaller scale, also in Portland, and that's not the MAX. Is that confusing? A tunnel under downtown would be amazing. We need it big time. People sometimes criticize the MAX for being too slow in downtown. Right now you are looking at actual footage at actual speed. I did not edit this speed or the clip of this at all. I just took this from a video that I've uploaded. This is the actual speed MAX runs through downtown, and people often criticize that it goes way too slow, that the MAX is dog slow, that I could probably roll in a wheelchair faster than this thing. And that's great, but that ignores the fact that the other 85% of the alignment is quite fast, hitting speeds of 55 miles an hour, highway speed. But a tunnel underneath downtown Portland would absolutely, night and day, change the experience of riding through Portland. Light rail running under downtown. Where have I seen that before? That seems awfully familiar. Aha! Seattle. Seattle saw the issues of Portland, and, well, it was for different reasons, but now light rail runs under downtown Seattle, and it actually is fast. This is what we should have been doing all along. What you are currently seeing now is an actual clip that I recorded of the link going through downtown Seattle between the stations. And you can see it's actually fast, and this is traveling through the heart of downtown Seattle. So yeah, this is what we should be doing. I've drawn it again, but this time a little bit cleaner. The tracks would descend on Jefferson Street. They would begin to go down on Jefferson Street in downtown Portland. And it would enter the tunnel just before the Goose Hollow MAX station, and it would serve a new platform below the existing Goose Hollow platform. And then it would then travel under downtown Portland through the Jefferson Street area and serve a potential station here at Jefferson Street. It feels kind of weird to not have any stations from here all the way to Pioneer Courthouse, but there's not really a whole lot here. So that's potential station use. Then it would travel underneath 6th Avenue or maybe Broadway, but 6th Avenue better connects with TriMet. And eventually goes to Pioneer Courthouse, serves Pioneer Courthouse, and then continues under 6th Avenue and serves Union Station. It then goes under Union Station, under the Willamette River, and serves Rose Quarter Transit Center underneath it. And this alignment would be closer to the Multnomah Street area. And then it serves a station near the Lloyd Center, although You could call it Holiday Park or Lloyd Center. It's right in that area. And then it would emerge from the tunnel and connect with the existing tracks along the Banfield Freeway. And blue and red lines would both use this tunnel because they're always known to just run together. And it alleviates one solution, which is what do we do with the existing tracks, which I'll talk about. And like I did with that 2020 video, here, let's black out the screen, and here is a list of the new stations underneath Portland. These are all the subway stations. And one note about these stations, the one with the star on it there, Jefferson Street, means that that is a potential station. But a note with all of these stations, I would build these long enough to be 3 or 4 car lengths long, in case TriMet ever wants to extend the platforms to 3 or 4 cars long. I understand this is way easier said than done. How are you going to extend the Washington Park station or the Sunset Transit Center station? The Hillsboro stations in downtown Hillsboro can be extended to 3 cars long, but not 4 cars long. So, yeah, there are some hiccups here. I would still consider extending, at least making the platforms 3 or 4 cars long from the start, even if you don't use it that way at first, and then just figure out how to extend the rest of the platforms later. It might be possible to rig up the trains or have special blue and red line trains that are only for use on blue and red lines, to where you could lock off some of the rear doors. That way, if you pull into a platform that you haven't extended yet, or that is just not possible to extend, you could say only the front 4 doors or the front 8 doors on this train will open. If you are in this rear part of the train, please move to the front portion of the train. London does this quite extensively, so it's not that weird. Blue line. I would extend this off to Forest Grove. I know the population isn't as high in Forest Grove as anywhere else, but the west side has a lot of development going on, not just in Forest Grove, but just in general. The west side is growing fast, and the transit service out here has remained pretty much unchanged for 2 decades. But before we start just extending tracks off to Forest Grove, there's this pesky freight track right in the way, right next to Hatfield Max Station, and it is absolutely used. I have a couple videos somewhere of a train crossing through this intersection. Yeah, it would not be a good idea to just put the Max tracks right across a freight track like that. So, how do we fix this? An undercrossing, or an overcrossing. After looking at Toronto's streetcar system, I got inspired by the Queens Quay Tunnel, where it's literally just streetcar tracks on a street, and then they just plummet underground, and the streetcars go underground and serve 2 stations. I got inspired by that to say, well, the Max kinda does the same thing on Washington Street in downtown Hillsboro. If you have the tracks gradually go down and enter a tunnel, you could serve a new Hatfield station, and there would be no corner anymore. It would just serve under the Hatfield station, and then have it come back up on the other side of the freight track. That way there's an undercrossing under the freight track. I'm turning into a robot. Take the tracks west of the Hillsboro Central Transit Center station and have them start a gradual descend to go into a tunnel. Unfortunately, 2nd Avenue, the intersection at 2nd Avenue, you would not be able to go all the way straight through, but if you were driving, you would just drive down to 1st Avenue, because by the time you get to 1st Avenue, the tracks should be under the road there. Then use the cut and cover method of tunneling under that intersection and serve a new platform at Hatfield. It would be between 1st Avenue and Adams Avenue. And this would be your new station, right by the parking garage. There would also be a pedestrian walkway right next to the platform that would allow you to walk under the freight crossing. That way, if there's a freight train going through that takes 10 minutes to go through, which has absolutely happened before, then you can just walk under the freight crossing and continue doing what you were doing. And to prevent cars from driving in this tunnel, as soon as it begins to descend into a tunnel, change the track to ballasted track. That way it doesn't look like you can just drive on it. And that would definitely deter more people. On the other side of the tunnel, after it emerges on the west side of that freight crossing, it would continue on this freight right-of-way that already exists all the way off to Forest Grove. And I am pretty close to 100% sure those tracks are not even used. Let's black the screen again, and here are the stations from Hatfield west that it would serve. These would be where the stations are. And a little note about the Robert Richmond station. That's the name of a library, I think. I did this quite a while ago and I forgot what it was. This was the name of, I'm pretty sure, a library at some community center over there. It's near the Nehalem Highway. Red Line. Well, no new stations would be constructed here. Already the Better Red project is going on, which will extend the Red Line to 10 additional stations on the west side, as well as completely redoing the Gateway area for Red Line trains. The only thing I would do here and change is build a second track at the new Gateway North platform. I might have to do a separate video on this because it's really confusing, but when trains come into Gateway, when the Red Line project is done, Red Lines are still going to have to take the crazy fishhook track to go off to the airport, which is really slow and should be eliminated entirely. But trains coming back from the airport are going to use a new Gateway North platform. Just that direction. That seems like it's going to add a lot of confusion. And so I would say Red Line trains in both directions should use that Gateway North platform, and then blue and green lines would use the normal Gateway platform. That way Red Lines are in fact always separated in both directions. That's the only thing I would do, is add a second track to the Gateway North platform. That way it actually eases a bit of confusion. Green Line. Southwest Corridor project. Do it. Tualatin Park and Ride would become the Bridgeport Transit Center, or Bridgeport Village Transit Center, or whatever. Hopefully I'll remember to link this in the description, but I will put the Southwest Corridor thing in there. And black out the screen. These were the proposed stations for that extension. Yellow Line. I would change this in such a way to where the Yellow Line and Orange Line are separate routes. The Yellow Line would continue over the steel bridge and go into downtown as a Yellow Line, and it would turn around at PSU. And so Yellow Lines would always be yellow. Yellow is always yellow. From PSU to the Expo Center. And the reason why I don't have it extending off to Vancouver is because I would have the Orange Line trains doing that. Many Portlanders know, if you ask them, hey, what max do I take to get to the Expo Center? They're going to say, oh, Yellow Line goes to the Expo Center. And it ends there. It always has, and in my opinion, it always should. I'll talk about the Orange Line and how that would work here now. Orange Line. Okay, I lied. We're actually going to talk about the Oregon City extension first. Right now, the Orange Line ends in the middle of nowhere, but the trackway along McLaughlin Boulevard could easily be extended off to the Oregon City Transit Center. Hopefully, this would increase ridership, as the Orange Line kind of feels like a ghost train. But here, let's black out the screen, and here are the Orange Line station extensions off to the Transit Center. And another note, Oregon City Station is the Amtrak station. As you see, there are lots of potential stations, and so I would say pick one or two of those and build those only. Now the extension to Vancouver, Washington. Now the extension I've made actually extends quite far into Vancouver, so this could be set up in a phased approach where you build it only a little bit, and then build some more, and eventually some more, and then eventually some more. But what I'll show you here extends furthest into Vancouver, Washington via the I-5 area. And also, lucky enough, There's a transit center and a major park and ride and several other major destinations right off of I-5 in Vancouver, which makes this easy. Ideally, you would have the tracks going under I-5 if the space is ever constrained. You wouldn't really want to be tearing down people's businesses and houses just so that you can widen the corridor and put tracks there. But the idea is to place the tracks in the I-5 corridor area. So the easiest way I would do this is to have the yellow and orange lines run together. So that means on the transit mall, green, yellow, and orange lines would all be running on 5th and 6th Avenues. And the yellow and orange lines would run together from there all the way up to the Albina, Mississippi station. And then before the Overlook Park station, it would veer off and go possibly under I-5. Then it would be a much faster version of the yellow line, only serving a couple of stops under I-5 or in the I-5 area before rejoining again near the Expo Center station and serving the Expo Center station. So these are those stations only up to Expo Center, and now are the rest of the stations going into Vancouver along I-5. Also, the phases, while this is still on screen, Phase 1 would be Interstate Rose Quarter to Expo Center. That would be fun to construct. Phase 2 is Expo Center to Vancouver Waterfront. Phase 3 would be from the waterfront to 99th Street Transit Center. And then these last two would be much further down the road, I think. But Phase 4 would be from 99th Street Transit Center to Salmon Creek Park and Ride. And eventually Phase 5, Salmon Creek Park and Ride to the Clark County Fairgrounds. And now the purple line. This would be a connection to Bridgeport Village from the west side. Have you ever been on the Line 76? Have you ever been on this ridiculously crowded bus on the west side that happens to serve this? I guess you could call the purple line the Highway 217 Max, although that's not a very, that's kind of a clunky name. But it would run next to, under Highway 217 to serve major destinations. It would serve a stop under Washington Square Mall, and then eventually joins up with the new Green Line extension to Bridgeport Village at the Hall Boulevard area. And so from Hall Boulevard on to the Bridgeport Village Transit Center would be served by both green and purple lines. And here are all the stations, and again, ones with asterisks on them are ones that you could build, but I wouldn't say they're top priority. Just potential stations. Airport Express. Now I think I might make a separate video on this, just a dedicated video, because I haven't fully figured it out yet. But in general, this line would run under Portland in that same subway tunnel that the blue and red lines use. And it would probably begin at the Pioneer Square area, and it would serve very, very few stops and would head straight off to the airport. The idea is it would serve downtown Portland and the airport and very few things in between. And for now, this is my station list for the Airport Express. Hillsboro Stadium. At one time, I thought of somehow extending the MAX out this way and serving the Hillsboro Stadium, and come to think of it, I just don't think that's a very good idea. If there was an event going on at Hillsboro Stadium, I would just bring out extra buses to serve that would directly connect to a MAX line. It would involve taking the blue or red line in the future trains to the Orenco station and boarding my new Line 41 all the way up Century Boulevard to the stadium itself. And during special events, I would again think they would run more frequently and entirely with 60-foot buses. And here's a card to the video where I talked about TriMet service improvements that I would make. It's a really long video, but I do talk about the Hillsboro buses in there. Here's a map that I'll keep on screen for a while. You can pause to look at it. It took me forever to make. I made it on paint, so that's why it doesn't look very good. But it shows all of the extensions that I would make, as well as all of the new stations. It does not show the Airport Express, though, or any commuter train lines. So now let's talk about streetcars. I'm going to make a video next week talking about the streetcars and streetcar future, but here's a little preview. You know how I would want the blue and red lines running under Portland? Well, that leaves a whole bunch of trackage in downtown not used by anything. So how do we fix that? Streetcars. Streetcar lines off to Goose Hollow and to the Lloyd Center area and all of that. More info on that next week. Well, that'll be it for this video, and I'll see you next time.